Hey, let me mute your stream really quick.
Sure.
How are you, Vaush?
Doing great. How about yourself?
I'm very nervous. You're kind of like my role model right now, so the fact that we're talking, I'm kind of like, but we're good.
No need to worry about it. It's the opposite of poisoning the well, I guess. Can you give your well, not necessarily your name, but whatever you want to call yourself and your pronouns to chat?
So I'm Lina Luxray. You can just call me Lina, and then she, they pronouns, please.
Okay. So, this is actually a call out. Very sorry. But I heard that you recently tweeted something very naughty. Okay. So I'm here to punish you for that. By being mean to you online. So you recently tweeted, what was it? I have a really bad memory.
Okay, so I basically tweeted under some tweet thread about being a stupid teenager. It was a short, quick tweet. I said, yeah, you're right. I'm better. I'm not a Nazi. And then I put a little smiley face.
Hmm. Now, what do you have to say for yourself?
Um, I'm not a Nazi. I have not been a Nazi for almost a year and a half, 2 years now. I think how people are treating me online has been kind of ridiculous. But I mean, I guess I understand to an extent being upset that there are people who are Nazis and former Nazis. But I think how the left treats people who are rehabilitated Nazis can be very not poggers
Yeah.
at times.
So I'd like to lay a little bit of groundwork if I could. I
Mhm.
wouldn't just have you on if you said something online that people didn't like. The reason why I'm having you on is because a lot of people didn't like what you had to say. I mean, you
Yeah.
got screenshotted by screenshotted by insane people tweets, and there were leftists all over the place yelling and yelling about you. I mean, some of these had
Hmm.
tens of thousands of likes and retweets, which was, I think, more than a little bit excessive. And it was frustrating to me because both through who I am and through the people that I've met, I know that human beings have a really impressive capacity to change. I want to talk about that a little broadly, but before I do, and you can say this to whatever extent you're comfortable, could you tell me what led to you, well, I don't know, calling yourself a Nazi or becoming one?
Um, I'll try to keep it short. Basically, what happened was my parents are conservative. I live in a rural area, and I was raised conservative. My dad actually used to parade me down around and be like, "Oh, look at my not stupid shit lib daughter," stuff like that, right? So then I started dating this guy, and he was also right wing. And I don't know how he fell down the pipeline, but he fell down the pipeline, and um, it sucked because I remember arguing with him for hours and hours and hours and being like, "Hey, I don't think you're right," like whatever. But I was also a minor at the time, and I was a lot more weak-minded and a lot less strong of a person than I am now, obviously, because I was a child, and I ended up falling down it too. So that's basically what happened is he had people groom him into it, and then I fell into it with him, and then we were both in it for probably about a year, year and a half. It happened sometime around the 2016 election, actually, with Trump.
Gotcha. And would it be inappropriate of me to describe that as you having been groomed into into the positions that you held?
No, I describe it that way myself because I was a minor, and there were a lot of adults in the spaces. And I would even say indoctrination because I know a lot of alt-right circles use indoctrination and cult tactics to get people in, preying on weaker people, preying on minors, all that stuff.
You know, that was one of the things that Steve Bannon did. He would find these online communities, usually ones of disaffected, anxious, insecure, conservative leaning white men, and he would try to push them down the alt-right pipeline by introducing them to propaganda, to, ideas that and he was in part responsible for what we see now, this resurgence of the alt-right online.
Hmm.
Um, I think that people are really susceptible to that type of stuff, especially when people are young, but especially when people, I think, are lonely. People usually conform to the political values of the communities that they're a part of, especially if they think that's the only community they would ever be able to be a part of. Did you ever get that impression back when you were in that circle?
Yeah, like that lonely people tend to get radicalized easier.
Yeah, and that like this was your crowd.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't really remember a ton of specifics, but I do know that I was pretty lonely in high school because I was a conservative already. And then, it kind of just got pushed further. It was like, well, they already hate you, so why not just be worse, I guess? Not, I didn't think that, but it kind of led to that.
But
But yeah, I definitely think so, yeah.
that's how it works broadly, isn't it? If you think you've already been written off by a person or a group of people, especially when you're young and, maybe more susceptible, you usually don't have a problem with pushing that boundary anymore. This happened to me in high school, This happened to everyone, I think. There will be like a crowd of people who you vaguely think don't like you, or maybe like one of that group was mean to you, but you write them off in your head and you become more comfortable ignoring them in the future or being cruel to them in the future, even if they hadn't done anything to you directly, or if only one of that group, or even if what they did in the first place was minor. Once you write a group off, once you feel like there's really no point in appealing to their interests, you no longer have any internal push to, act in ways that they find acceptable.
Yeah, definitely.
I
Um,
oh, sorry.
I go ahead, you're fine.
So the reason why this bothers me so much, and I'll take a moment to speak on this, is I was never super far right myself. I had like a libertarian dude bro phase, like kind of sexist, but it never got like really bad. Not certainly not compared to what a lot of young people are being run into these days. Um, and as I grew older, I am what I am now, and I have in my community quite a few people. Many of them are more sensitive than I am. They're much more, I guess the term that I would use derogatorially would be woke scoldy. I love them all, the fine people in my community, but they're sensitive. And what they used to be were, well, I guess like you, very far right. And I found almost across the board that what helps these people is the feeling that there is another community that they can be a part of. Because often these far right communities are horrible. They are miserable, nihilistic, hateful, depressing, full of suicidality, contempt, and cruelty. And sometimes you fall into that. You think, that's what I deserve. That's all I can get. But if there's another community, whether it be mine or somebody else's, that's more accepting, that can be a really strong impetus. Like, oh my God, there's an out, you know?
Yeah, I will just say that your community has been completely wonderful. Like, I used the new to the left chat a lot back in April when I first started like coming onto the server, and people were really helpful and people were really nice. I'd be like, "Hey, why is this like this and why did people believe this?" Um and I think the biggest thing for me is if I hadn't found you specifically, and if my best friend who's watching right now actually hadn't started arguing with me, and people weren't so generous to me, I don't think I would be a leftist this day. And that makes me sad because I'm sure there's lots of people like me that didn't find you or find a similar community that are still stuck there because people treat them terribly, which is unfortunate because we need more people like us and more leftists. And I think that if we don't accept people who made mistakes, we're never going to make it.
And I'm sure it goes without saying that if the online left was composed entirely of the types of people who were ridiculing you on Twitter the other day, it's probably a lot less likely that you would have moved over.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of get the feeling that if I hadn't been quoting Lenin from birth, then I'm not a leftist. Essentially, I'm not good enough.
So I am very, I think that it's empirically demonstrable that having a welcoming community available to people who are not necessarily fully into the ideological orthodoxy, who are maybe making a change or moving towards your position, albeit slowly sometimes, that strategy works. I believe that, and I think there's data on that too, so I don't feel too compelled to defend that point. There are other arguments that people bring up that I'd like to address if I could. But before we
Yeah.
do that, I want to be forthcoming, or actually, I guess I want you to be forthcoming. If you're comfortable with it, and this sounds really weird to say, but would you mind describing to me the extent of your hate when you were a Nazi? I mean, the positions that you held, the whatever it was that drove those beliefs of yours.
Sorry, my computer. 1 second. Okay, there it goes. Sorry, my computer was being funny. I was definitely Jewish questioned. I was a white nationalist. I will say 100% that my hate never went as far that I wanted to kill people. I did deny the Holocaust, but I never believed in exterminating Jews or exterminating minorities. I never wanted that. There were a lot of people in my community that did want that. And I think
And you
that's
may
kind of really
have
important distinction.
another year down the line too.
Oh, sorry, what do you mean?
Oh, like you may have a year down the line too, right? I mean, the longer you're in those
Oh,
communities.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, the longer you are in it, worse it gets. And it really makes me upset that I used to believe those things. But I think the biggest thing now is that I'm a better person now. And that's what's important to me personally.
So what happened to those feelings, you know? Now, I've had my mind changed in a lot of things as I grew older, but me personally, I've never experienced an ideological shift as significant as yours. I think a lot of people are wary of people like you or people in your
Hmm.
position because they feel like to you, I'm speaking generally, but I know people think this, like your ideology is a bouncy castle. You know, you whoop from
Yeah.
one to you whoop to the other, and you know, today sure you're a leftist, you're progressive, whatever, but you know, maybe tomorrow you see some really funny meme online where black people are dumb, and then you whoop back over. So what happened to move you? Where did those feelings go?
So in 2018, I think it was October, I
Mhm.
remember because it was like really huge. I broke up with my boyfriend. Some person on Twitter was saying that I'm a leftist because my Nazi boyfriend left me. No, I broke up with him. I thought that was funny. I'm like, how do you know about my life? But anyway, I
People,
broke up with him.
I mean, that's a common way of discrediting
Yeah,
like femmes in general, right? Like, oh,
yeah,
your boyfriend did this or that. Yeah.
yeah. Um, but I broke up with him in October 2018, and he sucked, and he was obsessed with me for months. And I'm sure he still is obsessed with me and still is a Nazi. But that's besides the point. I kind of started leaving those circles, and I think people started getting banned on Facebook. So, like, Nazi groups started getting banned, and people weren't allowed to talk about the things that they talked about. Um, And then I just kind of started slowly moving out of those circles and I just stopped being in them. And I just kind of became a conservative. I was still kind of racist, like vaguely, and I was still kind of like sexist and transphobic and whatever, but it wasn't like to the extent that it was. And then I think it was early 2020, maybe late 2019, my friend started arguing with me, who's watching right now. He was just like, "Hey, Lena, I don't think what you're believing is right. I think you should like reevaluate yourself." And that kind of got me thinking a little bit, and it was frustrating at first.
Mhm.
I remember feeling irritated, and then COVID hit, and COVID started happening, and I saw the right denying science and denying this and being like, "Oh, masks and this," and I kind of saw what it was going to be. It was going to be a big problem, and I just thought it was ridiculous how the right reacted to COVID in the beginning. And then he started sending me your videos, and I watched them. I think he sent me your 1350 video. He sent me some other videos that I can't remember anymore, but I started watching you and I enjoyed your content. I thought you were really intelligent and I thought you had a lot of good data to back up. Because I think, like, previously I'd never seen any data on any of this. Like, especially with your fact sheet, that was super helpful because I can sit and look through and be like, okay, there's this thing that's peer reviewed and this is documented and this is true and I can't deny it. Logically in my head, I can't deny it. So that's really what moved me over. And then also George Floyd being murdered. I remember the morning I woke up and I read the first articles that were coming out about him being murdered. Excuse me. And I was just like flabbergasted that people were like, "Oh, he deserved to die," and stuff like that. I'm like, people don't deserve to be murdered by anybody, much less the police. Like, and it was just kind of that slow shift from 2018 to April that I slowly became conservative, and then I had a short liberal phase. I attended a Black Lives Matter protest in my city, and I remember people had ACAB signs, and I'm like, "Oh, ACAB! Like, oh, of course they hate cops." And then like a month later, I was also ACAB pilled. So
What do you think led to that very rapid ideological shift? No, I don't mean like what video or anything, but what do you think made you so amicable then, to positions you were ideologically venomous towards just a year before?
Um, Give me a second to think, because I don't know 100%.
Because
Um,
it sounds like, if I'm inferring a little bit, that a lot of it had to do with you being removed from the communities that you had been a part of previously, since a lot of them got deleted or deplatformed or whatever. And I know from
yeah,
personal experience that when you're surrounded by people with certain ideas who use certain language, it's really easy to keep that up, you know, momentum wise, like
yeah,
the inertia. But if that
yeah. You were
drops,
just talking about that with the Arsler.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Because in some online communities, they're very edgy, like South Park edgy. You know, people will say like the R slur or the F slur or whatever,
Yep.
and and sometimes these communities, mind you, they're not even like conservative. You know, these would be people who vote for Bernie. Maybe they're edgy or some reactionary tendencies, but even in those communities, if you stay in them for long enough, you will find yourself using that same language, or at the very least, you'll find yourself thinking of it. Humans are really social. We fall into the patterns of the people around us.
Yeah, I would definitely say that was probably really important. Was just kind of moving out of those circles because you're not around it. You don't see the Jewish memes or the Black people memes or the the memes related to it and like people saying hateful stuff and stuff like that. And then I think also moving. Oh, I moved out of my parents' house too, which was really big for me. I live on my own now. I've lived on my own for a little bit over a year now, and I think that was really important too because I got out of my parents' fear of constant conservatism. My dad raised me on Fox News. We listened to Rush Limbaugh, and now I'm disgusted by it. And moving out definitely helped too because I wasn't around my conservative parents,
Hmm.
which I haven't talked to my dad in almost 2 months because of the Capitol riots. Actually,
I can imagine how that conversation went. Um, so there's a point that a lot of people make that I reject. There are people who believe that having formerly believed something makes you a threat to people on the left. That having formerly been racist, sexist, and Nazi, whatever. I think, and I've always thought, this is ridiculous. People are threats because of who they are now. Sometimes having formerly been a thing can mean you are still that thing, or it can mean that you're still influenced by having once been that thing. But the
hmm
mere act of once having been a thing does not inherently mean anything about you now. So I submit this as a counter argument to that idea. You know, a person who used to be a Nazi might have tendencies or inclinations that are still problematic. But if those exist, they would be evident. I mean, if they were doing some kind of harm, you would be able to see it. And if they are doing harm so subtle that it cannot be seen, then it really seems like it's not something worth getting upset over. But if you don't see harm being done, if you can't actually point to a bad thing being done, and you're judging a person exclusively based on what they or who they used to be, it's a very strange kind of essentialism, and I think it's really counterproductive, especially considering A, leftists are supposed to be in favor of rehabilitative justice. And
hmm
I know that a lot of the people who advocate for this online have never interacted with a real criminal, but as somebody who did volunteer work and academic work with prisons in during my university days, let me tell you, okay, there are plenty of people out there who have committed blue collar crimes, you know, like street crimes, and gotten in trouble for it, and these people will never be reformed, not in a
yeah,
million years. And then there are people who got radicalized by 4chan who are, I shit you not, 6 months of not being online away from going back to being a decent person. Humans are really, really complicated.
yeah. Yeah, I think that's the biggest frustration is a lot of people are like, well, you have to prove you're not a Nazi anymore. I'm like, you don't know me personally. I'm not expecting you to be friends with me. I'm not expecting you to hang out with me and talk to me. But you can scroll through my Twitter. I don't share hateful stuff anymore. I actually deleted my old Twitter from when I was a alt writer. I don't even know if you can find logs on those, but I guess I don't really care. Um, but I don't feel like I need to prove that I'm not a Nazi to people specifically because I know I'm not a Nazi and I know what I post and what I put out and what I talk about is nothing that Nazis talk about. I promise nothing.
Yeah.
And that's what's crazy to me. It's like people are saying, well, once a Nazi, always a Nazi, and they're like, well, could you have been a Nazi? It's like I was a minor.
Well, and you can't
If
prove
you've never,
a negative
sorry, go
either.
ahead.
No, you don't. I'm sorry. You can't prove a negative either. You can't.
Yeah,
How would you even do that? You can
yeah,
prove
that's
you're a good person today. You can, you can indicate your moral worth today, but you can't prove you're not a thing you used to be, because they'll always accuse you of secretly believing that
yeah.
thing
Oh,
of
I had people.
yeah.
Sorry, I had people that were saying, "Well, you watch Vaush, so you're still a Nazi," and I'm like,
Okay, well
"What in what
those people
world?"
are
Yeah, I was like, "What in what
yeah.
world do you have to be to think that if you watch Vaush in a good mindset and agree with him that they're a Nazi?" Like I was like,
They've never
"Whatever, guys."
watched me. That's the problem. They've
Oh yeah,
never
I know
seen a
people. I know people hate you a lot online, especially tankies and some specific leftists on Twitter.
They
But I'm
hate
okay with
me
that.
because I don't hate you. Because I actually believe in reformative justice. Because I actually believe that people can change. And because, first and foremost, I recognize that what we're part of right now is not just a social group. Now, my community is a bit of one, that's true, but it's
Hmm.
also a part of a broader political movement. And political movements need not be made up of people you like. They need not be made up of people you agree with. They need not be made up of people who you are comfortable around. They need only be made up of people with a shared set of interests who are willing to work together to achieve those interests. That's it. That's day one right there. And if somebody out there has a concern, if they want to say, "Hey, there are a lot of edgy former alt-righters in your community and they're being really bigoted and it's making people uncomfortable," that's a concern worth listening to. It's a concern worth hearing. But that's not the
Hmm.
concern I ever hear. The concern that I hear is these edgy former alt-righters in your community might act bigoted or harmful to the people around them. So we preemptively distrust them, and you must
Yep.
excise them from your community to avoid that potential threat. And to that I say, that is ridiculous. As if we're in such a position, leftists in America, that we can start turning away good people who could benefit from being exposed to a positive community.
Yeah, it's like your rehab channels. I actually really like them. I actually voice chatted in rehab the other day with some person, and it's like it's really good to just talk to people, even if it's not in 100% good faith. Just trying to do something and trying to change people's minds to at least something better is worthwhile. And I think what was happening on Twitter is just it's just harmful to the online left. I know
It's
leftists
harmful to
in
you
real life.
too.
Yeah. I've
You were
sorry.
sorry, I'm not trying to like assuage you of guilt. I still think that everyone's responsible for the things that they believe in, no matter
Hmm.
how they were influenced. I've always believed that. But you were fundamentally a person who was groomed by people in position of power over you, pushed towards a given set of beliefs. You worked to pull yourself out of that. You're better now. I think I think you deserve better treatment. I think everybody who's
Yeah.
struggled in the way you've struggled deserves better treatment. Not a parade, not a celebration, not all the POC in the world prostrating themselves before you in celebration of your, glorious removal from the alt-right, but just being treated like a regular fucking person. I think that would be a good treatment.
Yeah, and I mean, I talked to Demon Mama last night actually, and I don't know if you know, but she was also indoctrinated. She said she met you, so I'm sure you know. But she was also indoctrinated into a far right cult and religious cult, and it's like we don't treat people like this who were treated in any other sense besides politics when they're groomed. Like if a young person is groomed sexually, we don't victim blame them the way people victim blame me or victim blame Demon Mama or victim blame other um, ex far right extremists.
Hmm. Especially since, as I understand it, as far as I can tell, your crime was only ideological.
Yeah.
You weren't out there, gunning down minorities or leading a Fourth Reich into the Capitol Hill in Seattle or something,
No, I couldn't even vote. I literally couldn't even vote
Yeah.
when I was a Nazi. So I just don't understand.
No, I don't think that's nothing, by the way. I
Oh
don't think
no, no, I agree.
yeah, it's not nothing, but it's not it's not like there are people out there who are mending broken bones that you've sneered at and then reformed, and now you're not, now you're like, oh well, whatever. That's not really what's happening here. There's nowhere for you to go but forward. That's it. That's the only direction that you can move in, as I understand it. And a lot of people don't want you to, because they say it's because they're afraid of you, and I don't believe it. I honestly think it's just because they don't want you to be a part of their clique.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people are misrepresenting me. Like, I mean, obviously it's Twitter. People can crop and screenshot and edit whatever they want. But I made the quick tweet, haha, and I, I wasn't really thinking about it. Nobody ever sees my tweets. I wasn't even like, I was just like, hey, I'm happy and I'm proud of myself for being a better person now.
Hmm.
And and then I clarified below once I started seeing it was getting traction. I was like, hey, I was groomed into it. I'm not proud of myself. I don't think it's like nothing. I was just making a tweet about being happy about myself being a better person. And, of course, people leave that part out, or they argue against it or say I'm lying or
Well, yeah, because
whatever.
what they
And I just
want
felt
to believe,
misrepresented.
the narrative they want, is that you were saying like, oh yeah, I used to be a Nazi, haha, like you're you're like some valley girl, like idle-minded, vacant-brained, like haha, whatever. They read a lot of flippancy into your tweet, which I
Yeah.
admit, I mean, I can understand why the tweet looked a little flippant, but I think
Yeah.
even a remotely charitable reading of that, if you put a little bit of thought into that.
Yeah, at least a little bit of good faith. It could have been seen, but of course it wasn't, because
Yeah.
online leftists, unfortunately.
What do you think of people who recognize your right to be a part of the left, but are uncomfortable sharing social spaces with you?
I'm perfectly fine with that. If people don't want to talk to me, if people don't want to be my friend, that's fine. I'm not here to be their friend. I'm not here to force them to be my friend. I'm here to advocate for the political opinions that I believe in, and that's what's most important to me. If they don't want to be my friend, that's fine. But I have a lot of people that are my friends, and I'm okay with that too. Obviously.
That's awesome. I think that at the end of the day, it's a political movement, but we also choose to put ourselves in different social spaces depending on our preferences. There are leftists who watch Cumtown, and that's pretty edgy. And there are leftists who like me, and then there are leftists who watch, I don't know, Thought Slime or ContraPoints, or more orthodox bread tubers with sensitive
Hmm.
communities. And I think all of that is fine. And that's why I'm proud of what I do, because I want to have a community robust enough to accommodate people who disagree with us, even severely as a Nazi would. Because, it sounds cheesy, but at the end of the day, I really do think that most people could be pulled away from the horrible things they believe, if they believe horrible things, um, with a new friend. If the new
Yeah.
friend, talk from time to time on Discord, share your opinions, talk about your day, and eventually, inevitably, people will come over, because I think a lot of the people in the far right are really just looking for friends.
Yeah, I would say like definitely. I was just looking for friends and people to talk to and people to meme with, and of course they happen to all be Nazis, which
Yeah.
wasn't great.
And
But
I
I think
oh,
if I had a leftist friend, I probably would not have been a Nazi, but
and
I didn't. So.
I want to reiterate as a final comment, there are going to be people who have interpreted everything that is being said here as, oh, they became a Nazi because like POC and lefties were annoying. If you actually listen to anything we said, that's the opposite of what
Hmm.
they said. There are going to be people who say that they're being given a free pass. I don't know what that means, a free pass. What punishment is appropriate? How many strikes across the temple with a whip? What are we talking about right here? That's just not how I work, not
Yeah.
how I function. I don't even know what that means. And there are going to be people who say that that this is all being made flippant. It's being meaningless. Like, oh, Nazi, not a big deal, whatever. Haha, you just needed a friend. And I just want to say, I completely believe that being a Nazi is a bad thing. It's a very hot take for this channel. I think that it leads people towards monstrous opinions. But I think you have to recognize the humanity even in people with monstrous opinions, because an inability to do so means that you're not going to be capable of stopping them when they come for you. You will never, ever, 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 ever be able to manage a political movement if you're incapable of understanding the motivations of the people who disagree with you. And if you're in a position, as I am, to foster a community that can bring people, any number of people, even just one person over, I think that's a morally righteous thing to do. If for no other reason than because my community can handle it, and it means that it's not happening in other communities full of people who maybe don't want to handle it.
Yeah, and I also want to comment on really quickly. I think that while it's not a great thing that people were former Nazis, I think that former like alt-right reactionaries have utility in our movement because they understand where the people are coming from and they know at heart what is driving these people and they can do something about it.
Oh
And I
yeah,
think that's really important.
your average online lefty who was decided at 11 that they were a Marxist-Leninist has literally no idea what anyone anywhere knows or wants. They are utterly detached. They live in a cloud. They have no idea about anything. A person who's actually been out there, who made mistakes, learned, and is now where they are, where you are now, is, I think, infinitely more useful. And actually, if you look back in the history of leftist movements in America and abroad, you're going to find a lot of the leaders and higher ups had similar pasts, because that kind of stuff is radicalizing, because that kind of stuff is educational, if nothing else. And God, if not, you know, if anything else, look at how much people who moved from the left over to the right have done for their movement, huh? All those grifty pieces of shit. Well, imagine them happening to us, except they're real. They actually did change their minds, and all the perspectives and arguments they can offer us through their experience on the right. I mean,
Hmm.
geez.
I also think that a lot of the leftists who are criticizing me don't really understand that the majority of white Americans, especially in rural areas, like rural areas especially, a lot of them are raised to be vaguely racist. A lot of them are raised to be homophobic and transphobic, and they don't really meet people that can change their ideas. They're raised with their boomer Gen X parents that tell them, oh, how Black Lives Matter is racist, all lives matter, or things like that. Like they don't have that experience of living in a city or being a person of color.
Mhm.
They don't have that experience.
We
And
need to
unless you give them that experience, they will never know.
we need to deploy our empathy broadly, because I'll tell you this much. Talk to your average online lefty, look at them and say, "Oh, I don't care if that guy says he's a progressive now. That guy is an immigrant from Saudi Arabia. Do you have any idea what they do over there? Do you have any idea what they say? Nuh-uh. I don't want Saudi Arabians in our movement." Any lefty said that, yeah, they'd be out. They'd be out in 30 seconds right there. A lot of the people in Saudi Arabia do have reactionary political views because they're products of their environments, as are people who live here in America. So if we can be, and as people are, sympathetic to those born in areas of the world where there are strong reactionary tendencies, we'll make the arguments, hey, anyone can improve. You know, everyone's a product of their environment, huh? What choice did they have in who their parents would be or what school they would go to? If we can make those arguments for other people, I don't know why we can't do it for fucking white kids born in rural America to racist parents. I don't know why. I don't know why we would apply that logic selectively, you know?
Can I reply to somebody in chat really quick? Sorry.
Oh,
I wasn't like
absolutely.
I wasn't trying to equate Nazism and being like racist from like your parents. I'm just saying that like they seem to not even accept people who were formerly racist, like because of their environment or whatever. I didn't mean to equate those two. Sorry if
I
misconception.
mean, it leads into it, doesn't it? I mean, being born to racist parents, it's honestly, American white supremacy is basically like hair's width away from like white nationalism anyway. And that's
Yeah.
itself not really that far away from neo-Nazism. So, I mean, it's, you know, it's a lot of it really does come down to the zip code. Um,
Yeah.
I appreciate you coming on and speaking with me. It's genuinely an honor to be in a position where good people like you can change as a product of my community, and I think you should be enormously proud of the changes that you have made.
Thank you. That's one of the main reasons I haven't been super upset about this whole thing is because I know I'm a good person and that's what's most important to me. And I'm very thankful that you had me on. Like I said, you're probably the biggest person that moved me left and I appreciate it so much. Like 100% favorite person.
And it should be noted, of course, that the people who are being dipshits to you on Twitter are themselves products of their environment. And I think that a lot of the logic there, though they're not Nazis or anything like that, would apply similarly, that a lot of their
Hmm.
toxicity, their unproductivity could be addressed and alleviated if they had a conversation with you. Because I doubt many of them would even want to think of you as a person who could speak kindly on an issue they care about. That would make it much
Yeah.
harder for them to condemn you.
Yeah, they have to kind of almost dehumanize you and just say like, "Oh, they're a bad person," and that's the end of it, and they're nothing else.
No. You do watch Vaush, and Vaush bad, so
Yes,
there's that.
Vaush, very bad.
You have a wonderful night, okay?
Thank you. Oh, final meme:
Yeah, absolutely.
trans rights.
Wow, nice virtue signal, Nazi. No, 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 I'm kidding. No, trans rights. Oh, do you have a social you want to plug, by the way? Like any
Oh,
project?
yeah, sure. I mean, I was kind of thinking about maybe spurring off some streaming from starting this. I haven't really decided yet, but I guess we'll figure that out soon. My Twitter is at Lina Luxrays, LINALUXRAY, and that's where I mainly post my stuff that isn't my Facebook. So,
Gotcha. Well, if there are any upcoming project links that you'd be interested in sharing, make sure to message Tempest on Discord and throw them his way, and he'll throw them into the video description, okay?
oh, awesome. Thank you.
Take care, okay?
Yeah, have a good night. Thanks for having me on.
Peace.